America is a land of refugees, a land of immigrants. However, we rarely look at the complexities of history of immigrants to America, those who came as political refugees, those who came as economic refugees, and those who came trying to escape starvation and famine. Let me talk most about those who came to escape famine and not go back to the colonial period, because that seems too far back. But the middle of the 19th century, refugees began to come in to the United States because they wanted new economic opportunities, and they were also being persecuted in their own country. Oddly, and in ways quite similar to what's happening to now, they were coming in order to seek new economic opportunities. This was called the First Prussian Wave. The Prussian being at that time the term used to refer to what we later came to think of as the larger areas of Germany. They were quite elite. They settled in very quickly. And there were lots of economic opportunities in the middle of the 19th century and late 19th century because we were just beginning to industrialize. The next wave of refugees that came to us came in order to escape the famine in Ireland. And those came into the country because the potato crop had failed and people were starving in Ireland. And the United States took these people in as people who were essentially fleeing famine. That's an important consideration because both of these waves, which were early waves, were of people that we would now regard as white. Although much earlier in their history, 2 centuries back, before they came here, Irish were systematically regarded as black by the British people in the British Empire and all over the world. And now, we find that very strange because today we equate being black with phenotypical characteristics having to do with skin color, total phenotype, hair, the nature of the hair, the composition of the hair, and also certain other features having to do with stature, having to do with size, etc. But what we have to remember about racism then and now is that it's always been related to the need of the American society to find an underdog. And when we could find an underdog in refugees, we were always happy to do it, it seems, throughout our history. And that's a very good question to research. The next group I want to work toward is sort of skipping entirely over World War I, which is a shame because there's a lot to say about that, but going more recently to the refugees who are coming from World War II. And I take this because of the fact that many of you have already studied the European Union and the situation there with the refugees coming in from the Middle East and the African civil wars. The reference you often hear is this is the greatest refugee crisis since the end of the Second World War. You may remember, if you've not had a good course in Second World War history, that after the Second World War, many people fled. They fled, of course, during the war, particularly Jews who could get out. But after the war, economic circumstances were dreadful, and people were still quite afraid. So the United States did take in a lot of refugees after the war. They were typically called displaced persons. And I had the experience of working with displaced persons when I worked at a college in New York State, a college called Vassar College, which many of you may have heard of. And Vassar, at the time that I was there in the 60s and the 70s, as a faculty member, took in displaced persons to clean the dormitories. Displaced persons were men and women, and they were largely assigned to menial jobs. Now, you're going to see a PowerPoint soon, which will show you 4 aspects of refugee life in the United States and refugee circumstances in the United States. But then I'd ask you to look at that and make it a list of 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the second thing I'd ask you to do is to flash across that list with 3 flashes. And those 3 flashes I want to mention now, because one of the things we did after the Vietnam War was take in many refugees from Vietnam. We took them in during the war. There were 3 waves. The first wave was that wave, which included the wealthiest of the Vietnamese, and they came and immediately set up businesses, and they had very privileged status, and they now represent some of the most elite families in those areas to which they came to settle. In recent times in the United States, because we are such a large nation, refugees have chosen certain sections of the country in which to settle. The Vietnamese chose in large part to come to the West Coast, to California. That's where they landed. They had gone through refugee camps in Hawaii for socialization and beginning English training, which was run by the Center for Applied Linguistics in Washington, D.C., but it was run in Hawaii. And so coming to California seemed a natural thing to do, of course, for the first refugee wave. But those were very wealthy Vietnamese. The second wave were those who were what we would now call middle class. They were the middle class folks who were trying to get out of Vietnam, not knowing what the future was going to hold. They have also done quite well, and many of the businesses in certain sections of California are run entirely by Vietnamese and business people. The third group that came toward the end of the war were those who were absolutely desperate. Many of them had gotten on flimsy boats. It's very much like the stories we're hearing of the refugees that are entering Greece and Italy. They come on flimsy boats. Many had died in the transport. They were just trying to escape the end of the war, which is dreadful. After the war, we took in some other refugee groups that we thought would not be treated well, because we had basically turned southern Vietnam over to the communists. And these were the tribal people, the Hmong and other tribal groups that lived high in the mountains in Vietnam. And those tended to go to certain sections of California and to Minnesota. Let's not even start to talk about why people from Vietnam would have gone to Minnesota. But there they have been, and there they have settled. Those are groups that have acculturated. And one of the things that you'll see later on is a slide distinguishing between assimilation in the United States and acculturation. The Hmong and the tribal groups were the first to acculturate. That is, they did not become assimilated immediately into the business world and into the American culture. Now, many of you are going to be thinking about what is this going to mean about the policy of the U.S. perhaps taking in Syrian refugees here. We don't know how that's going to work. It is certainly the case, as I indicate in the PowerPoints that you're going to see in this film, the issue of whether or not these individuals will be viewed as acceptable within a country that is based largely on Judeo-Christian principles. Often we go through our lives every day and we don't think about the Judeo-Christian principles, but 3 things that really matter in the Judeo-Christian principles that will not necessarily reconcile with the values of the Syrians who are coming in. One is that there is some degree, at least some sense of norm for some kind of equity in the family between the male and female. That will not be the accepted norm within Syrian families. Secondly, we tend to accept the value of life for everyone. And therefore, we do not condone the denigration of the lives of certain people over other people. We will be very suspicious of the fact that many Syrians may do that because of the various sects of the Islamic religion. of the Shiites and the Sunnis are the ones we hear about the most, but there are many other subsects that we hear about. And individuals in various parts of the country are going to be very suspicious of whether or not the Shiite Sunni groups coming in as the Syrians will have a general large-scale respect for human life of all kinds. The third issue is going to be the extent to which these are groups that will be able to adapt to certain work ethics and educational ethics and norms within of the United States. These have always been issues, as you will see in the slide that talks about some of the norms that came in with the first refugees and the early refugees I talk about in the 19th century and the 20th century. And the issue is whether that will hold for the 21st century, not only because of the fact that we're getting Syrians, which are Islamic, and that's a very different thing for the U.S. because that is in no way related to Judeo-Christian values, but also because of the differentiation of the role of women and girls. And in addition, the fact that many of these individuals will not have had long-term familiarity with a regular educational system that accepts both males and females and looks to education as a way to prepare for work. So there are many unknowns that are circulating around the refugees that we will be taking. And I'm sure as you go forward in thinking about refugee issues now all over the world and who can escape that kind of thinking, these are the kinds of issues that will remain with you. Good luck in this project.